Here comes everything you need to know about miking up and mixing live guitars. What happens when you put a 57 dead on the cone of a Fender speaker? What difference does it make if you pick a 906 microphone? Low cuts, high cuts, boosting EQ, cutting EQ, compression, gating, effects, acoustic guitar with no pickup, using a microphone on that acoustic guitar. We're going to take a look at all of these and maybe a couple of more things in this video, and by the end you'll know exactly when to pick which microphone and what to do if your guitarist turns up with no pickup in their acoustic. We'll dive into a lot of EQ in this video, so check out the link in the description below for my free EQ guide. Without further ado, let's dive in. Let's start with acoustic guitars because they are definitely the most problematic, right? In an ideal situation, your guitarist is going to come with their acoustic guitar and they're going to have a pickup installed in it. They're going to have put a fresh battery in that pickup, and you're going to get a DI box, and you could connect that acoustic guitar to your mixer using a DI box. It's a quiet instrument, so there's actually quite a high probability of feedback if you start turning up in the system too loud. It's naturally resonant, so if you start putting sound in monitors and too much in the PA, then that guitar will vibrate with those sounds and you'll get a sort of low end feedback. The biggest problem with this scenario is that you're at the mercy of the guitar. The guitar itself and the pickup installed in it is what's going to determine the quality of the sound that you get. And actually, processing can't really help you out that much, but we will look at it. Before we talk about processing, let's talk about the nightmare scenario, which is the guitarist turns up and they don't have a pickup in their guitar. You need to put a microphone on that acoustic guitar. The ideal situation here is a clip-on microphone like a DPA 4099. If you're using a 4099, you're going to need a specific mount for the acoustic guitar, and you can clip that on the underside of the guitar, sort of facing onto the top. And you want to aim that sort of above the sound hole, somewhere near the neck, and keep that out of the way of their hands while they're strumming. That's going to give you the best signal to noise ratio in this example. Obviously, you can use other microphone brands. DPA is just the most common. The second option, of course, is to use a small diaphragm condenser. This is worse for a few reasons, but the benefit of the small diaphragm over a large diaphragm condenser is that it's a little more discreet on a stage. It doesn't take up as much space. It's easier to get in position. You want to aim that for a similar place, above the sound hole, near the neck. You want to try and get as much sound from that guitar as possible, but still with a usable tone, and keep it out the way of the hands of the player. This is going to be really, really difficult. You want to get it nice and close, but they're going to want to move around. You need to communicate with the performer and tell them that they need to be as close to that microphone as possible, because this gets hard. You might be tempted to go for the sound hole, but things get really, really boomy down there and you're not going to get a lot of clarity on that acoustic guitar. This is the most likely to feedback of all of our situations, so you have to be really careful here. And hopefully your guitarist has a feedback suppressor, which is a little plastic cover that you install in the sound hole of that acoustic guitar, and then that helps mitigate feedback somehow. I don't know how. They're really cheap, so if the guitarist turns up without one, give them a lecture. If you're a guitarist watching this, go get one right now. If you can't get away from the feedback, you need to move your guitarist and your microphone further from the PA. Try and move them center stage and upstage so that they are as far from the speakers as possible. That way you will get the most gain before feedback. So what do we do once we've connected this acoustic guitar to our mixer? If you're using a DI box, you want to be using an active DI box, and you want to have phantom power engaged to make sure that that DI box is on. If you're getting any kind of hum, you want to engage that earth lift on the DI box as well. Like I said, you are at the mercy of the guitar and the pickups here, but you can do a little bit with EQ. You want to use a high pass filter to try and remove any boominess. You know, you can probably go up to about 80 or 100 here, but make sure that you're not removing body from the guitar. You still want that guitar to have a little bit of impact when they play, especially if it's solo. If it's in a band, you can maybe bring that high pass filter a little higher. EQ here, be very, very gentle. You want to kind of massage the guitar into place. If it's quite a warm tone and you need it to cut more, try cutting in sort of low mids, somewhere 400, 500, something like that. Wide cuts. Same with any boosts, maybe like 1K to 2K if you need it to cut through. Similarly, you can cut there if there's any kind of scratchiness. But really, anything more than like 3 decibels of cutting is probably just you fighting against the pickup. You need a good pickup to get a good acoustic guitar sound. If you don't have a good pickup, Don't beat yourself up over it, do what you can. If you're getting particularly nasty resonance or feedback, try using a really narrow cue, zoning in on that tone, and then just cutting it out, maybe like 6 decibels in this case. Compression sounds really nice on acoustic guitars. It really kind of gives them punch, impact, and evens out the performance as well. But you need to know the settings. Start with a low ratio, 1:2, something like that. Get yourself a slow attack. Get up to 50 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond attack. Maybe 100's a bit far, but experiment with the attack and bring that release down to sort of medium, 50 milliseconds, let's call it. And I want you to just dial in that compressor until you see like 3 decibels of gain reduction, 6 to the max when the guitarist is playing. Do you like my arm going here? Be really aware that too much compression will exacerbate feedback. It will cause feedback. So be conservative always with compression. Acoustic guitars also love reverb. Get yourself a nice hall or maybe a plate reverb. Get yourself a decay time of 1.8, maybe 2 seconds. Make sure that on your returns, you're cutting out the high frequencies from that reverb because you don't want it to be too nasty and shimmery. And then just kind of go in with quite a lot. You'd be surprised how much you can get away with in the context of a performance. Of course, it's dependent on style. And if you've got really sort of indie, wishy-washy, melancholic singing a la Bon Iver or something, just drown that sucker in reverb and always ask the performer what they like as well. And if they don't know, just do what you want. Now, monitors for acoustic guitars can be tough because, as I said, they are likely to feed back. But if it's a band setting, then your guitarist is going to need to hear that in their monitors. You can't be too conservative because it's a quiet instrument and they need to hear it. You just need to be on top of it. Make sure that you know where the top is, where you can't send any more into that monitor. Make sure that your monitors are wrung out. If you don't know how to ring out monitors, then you can check out my free EQ guide here. That should help you out with that. And if you're using a microphone, then you just need to explain to them that you're going to need to be very conservative with the monitors and that any sound coming from that monitor is going into that microphone. If their monitor is louder than their guitar, you're doomed. They're doomed. We're all doomed. Let's dive into electric guitars. What microphone do you use on an electric guitar? SM57 is a classic. I love it. I use it all the time. I actually prefer it to other microphones on guitars. Maybe that's controversial. I don't know. It's all about where and how you position that microphone and knowing about the guitar and the amplifier that people are using. With a 57, you need to go to the edge of the speaker cone because in the center of the speaker cone, you get a lot of high frequencies and the 57 already has a bit of a sort of harsh high mid section. So you might end up with this really scratchy guitar tone. And no one wants that, do they? We want smooth and clear. So move towards the edge of the speaker. Take some time if you've got it, experiment, go further towards the edge and use the torch on your phone, or if you're fancy, use like a headlamp and shine it onto the speaker cabinet and see where that speaker is. Another incredible microphone for electric guitar amplifiers is the Sennheiser 906. It's a lot softer than a 57. There's way less of a high mid boost, and when you put it on a guitar, you're probably going to have this kind of warm, soft tone and not a lot of harshness. So in that sense, it tolerates being on the cone of the speaker a little better, but still experiment with positioning. When do I reach for this microphone? When someone has a really bright guitar and also a really bright amplifier. So if someone comes in with a Fender Telecaster and a Fender twin amplifier or a Vox AC30 or something, I usually can tell it's going to be a bit of a twangy sound, and so that's the time to go for the softer mic. If someone's rocking out with a Les Paul and a Marshall amplifier, then consider grabbing a 57. Either way, you just need to use both of the microphones enough and start to intrinsically learn how they sound, and then you'll be able to make the decision when you hear it. Although sometimes we're limited by what we have in the venue mic locker, so use what you've got, learn it. Another really handy feature of a 906 microphone is that it's sort of got this flat front address situation, right? Where you can loop a microphone cable through the handle of a guitar amplifier, drape it over the guitar amplifier, and then connect the microphone and use a bit of tape to fasten the microphone in place. And then you can have the microphone just hanging over the guitar and you don't need a stand. Make sure on this microphone that the bit that says front is pointed at the guitar amplifier. Don't point it at the audience. If you're feeling extra fancy and you have a really warm, nice, smooth tone, for example, it's jazz, then why don't you grab a small or a large diaphragm condenser? I've used DPA 2011 microphones a lot on guitars. I think they sound really, really nice. It's worth a try. Check it out. The next step in getting a great electric guitar mix is controlling the amplifier volume and tone. If the amplifier is too loud, then you will never be able to balance the sound correctly in the venue, and you'll never be able to make it sound good. You also lose all control of tone shaping with EQ. If the guitarist is obsessed with playing incredibly loud, then take the amplifier and turn it to face them. Put the amplifier on the side of the stage and have it play across the stage at the guitarist and the band. You can also mount it on top of something so it's higher, closer to their ears. You can tip it back so that it plays up towards their ears. Anything to get more guitar sound in their ears and less in the audience if they're playing really, really loud. However, I am a fan of getting the amplifier volume correct and then having it play into the audience to supplement my microphone tone, because that's what I like. So if you're doing this, it's also important to have a sort of barometer for how loud is loud enough, and make sure that guitarists are also playing loud enough. If I've got a 57 on a guitar amplifier and I have my gain on my 57 turned up to about 30 decibels, if I'm not hitting 0 on the meters, which is about minus 18 dB FS, I think, then I know that that guitar is probably too quiet. Situations vary, but start thinking about this and start learning where the signal is on the meters when you have enough sound. You can also use that to gauge if you have too much sound. It's also obviously style dependent, and if it's like soft rock, then you probably don't need a screaming amplifier, and the overall volume of the show doesn't need to be as high, so then you don't need the signal to be as high. The final electric guitar thing you might need to set up is virtual guitar amplifiers, or what are they called? Emulators? Simulators? I can't remember right now. Kemper, Axe Effects, Line 6 Helix. These sort of boards that have impulse responses of guitar cabinets and everything, tone controls, all modeling amplifiers, that's what they're called, all modeled inside them. You just need to connect an XLR line, usually 2 XLR lines, out of them and straight into your stage box, and it'll have a line level signal coming straight out of it. I usually pan these a little left, a little right, so there's some stereo effect, but it's not too crazy. Just don't send phantom power into them, you might break them. What about electric guitar processing then? What settings do we need on the mixer? I'm going to high pass just about every electric guitar up to around 100 Hz. It's also really likely that I'm going to go in with a low mid cut, somewhere like 150, 200, just because of proximity effect and microphones. Less likely with the modeling amplifiers, but still. I'm also going to have cuts probably in the mids, maybe in the high mids if I'm using a 57, but less so in the mid-mids if I'm using a 57. If I'm using a 906, it's likely to be a couple of cuts in the mids and low mids, and then some sort of boost in the high mids to kind of cut through a little bit. Again, totally depends on tone. If something's not cutting through, I'll boost about 2K. If it's cutting through too much, I'll cut about 2K. And then I'm looking to cut probably 500 to 800 is where you get some kind of like lack of clarity, woofiness, that sort of thing. Kempers and Axe Effects are usually a little more difficult to EQ for. I always find that the high mids sound a little unnatural. I usually end up cutting some things with narrower bands up in the kind of 1 kHz to 3 kHz region. Also in the kind of low mids, 500 Hz, somewhere like that. I usually find there's this weird sort of just rumbliness that I don't particularly like in them that doesn't complement my mix well. Maybe they sound fine alone, but when it comes to the mix, I usually find that I have to cut something down there. The rest of the processing for electric guitars is usually very easy. I don't tend to add compression or gating or any effects because electric guitarists usually have pedal boards and they are quite precious about those sort of things, so I let them take care of it. I don't usually add them into the monitors unless I'm asked for it, because guitar amplifiers are loud and they can probably hear enough of themselves already. The exception, of course, is Kempers and Axe Effects units because they don't have any stage volume. Make sure when your guitarist has pedals that you get them to step through every single pedal that adjusts the gain of the guitar. It's really, really common to find mismatched gain, and you don't want them to hit that during a show and then suddenly suck all the life out of your guitar tone because the distortion tone is actually 10 decibels quieter than the clean tone. That's a nightmare. If you want a video on how to set up and process drums, I'll leave that over here. And if you want to set up a PA system, I'll leave that one here. Thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.